好，开始。
Mr. Speaker, honorable judges, and fellow debaters, the motion before the House today is: this House believes that human beings have free will. As the first speakers of the proposition, I firmly believe that human beings have free will. This position aligns with libertarianism, which asserts that humans possess genuine agency and can make choices not entirely determined by prior causes. By free will, we do not mean total independence from all influence. Rather, it means that even though we are influenced by biology and environment, we still have the ability to reflect, evaluate, and choose between alternatives. Today, the proposition will prove three things. First, the existence of choice proves free will. According to Asa Berlin, freedom requires the presence of real alternatives. If there is only one possible outcome, then there is no freedom. But in human life, we constantly face choices. We choose that to study, what to say, and how to act. More importantly, we reflect before choosing. For example, when a person feels anger, they may have an impulse to hurt someone, but they can pause, think, and decide not to act. This ability to override impulse shows that we are not mere biological machines. The opposition may argue that every choice has a cause, but having causes doesn't mean having no freedom. Influence is not the same as determination. Even if I am influenced by my background, I can still reflect on it and choose differently. Therefore, the existence of real alternatives.
好，
嗯，
你要让我回答吗？要让我回答，你就是 go ahead，或者是你要让我提问吗？还是你希望我晚一点提问？
都可以啊。
你现在要做决定。
那就现在玩。
OK。You feel you are choosing, but if science shows your brain begins the action seconds before you are aware of it, isn't your feeling of choice just a delayed observation of a predetermined event?
Thank you for the question. This argument confuses the mechanism of a decision with the ownership of a decision. Yes, the brain shows activity before conscious awareness, but only tells us how a decision is implemented, not who controls it. Even in Leavitt's own experiments, he proposed the idea of free will, meaning we still have the ability to veto an action after the initial impulse. More importantly, these experiments only apply to simple motor actions, not complex moral decisions like choosing honesty over lying. So what the opposition has proven is not that free will doesn't exist, but that free will has a biological process, which is entirely consistent with our cases.
你要继续你原本的东西。
弄到哪呀？But having causes does not mean having no freedom. Influence is not the same as determination. Even if I am influenced by my background, I can still reflect on it and choose differently. Therefore, the existence of real alternatives and reflection proves free will. Second, our legal and moral systems rely on free will. In criminal laws, a person is judged based on actus reus and mens rea. This distinction shows something important. We treat accidents differently from intentional crimes. We treat a child differently from a fully responsible adult. Why? Because we recognize that responsibility depends on the ability to choose. If humans had no free will, then a murderer would be no different from a falling rock. But clearly, society does not operate this way. We punish people because they could have chosen otherwise. We praise people because they chose the moral path. If free will does
The second, is it not possible that the legal concept of intent is simply a useful social construct to maintain order rather than a proof of an actual biological ability to override causality?
Thank you. Even if law has a functional purpose, it still relies on a deeper assumption that individuals are capable of making choices. The concept of men's will is not arbitrary. It reflects a fundamental distinction between someone who could not control their action and someone who chose to act. If humans truly had no control, there would be no reason to distinguish between accident and intention. But every legal system in the world make this distinction, which show that we recognize human agency as real, not fictional. Uh, if free will does not exist, then praise, blame, justice, and responsibility all collapse. Third, scientists science cannot eliminate free will. The opposition may cite neuro- neuroscience like life-based experience. They argue that the brain decides before we are aware, but this only shows that decisions have physical process. It does not prove that freedom does not exist. Jordan Habermas makes a key distinction. Science explains causes, human acts based on a reasons. A brain scan shows neuron firing, but it cannot explain meaning, intention, or morality. Saying free will does not exist because the brain is involved is like saying a book has no meaning because it is made of paper. The mechanism does not erase the meaning. Humans can reflect, resist, and change. We can overcome instincts, habits, and pressure. That is free will. In conclusion, we have proven three things. Humans make real choices. Law depends on responsibility. Science cannot fully explain. Human beings are not just biological machines. We are rational agents capable of reflection and choice. Without free will, morality collapses, justice becomes meaningless, and human dignity disappears. Therefore, for acts of reason, responsibility, and human dignity, we strongly affirm that human beings have free will. I beg you to propose.
Thank you. OK，换人了。Madam Speaker, judges, and fellow delegate, the proposition today has painted a picture of human beings as autonomous master of their own destiny. They rely on the intuitive feeling that because we choose what to eat or what to say, we must possess free will. However, the opposition stands firmly against this motion. First, we must challenge the proposition's definition. They define free will as ability to choose. We argue that a choice is only free if it is not the inevitable result of previous causes. If our decisions are dictated by biological precursors, the choice is merely a predetermined outcome. Our team stance is clear. Human beings are complex biological machines governed by the laws of physics and causality. What we call free will is simply a biological illusion. Human decisions are initiated by the brain before the conscious mind is even aware of them. In a deterministic universe, every event follows a cause. As part of the physical world, the brain is no exception. If we can detect a physical decision in the brain before the person feels they have decided, then the conscious will is a passenger, not a driver. Consider Benjamin Libet's experiment, which is very famous. He discovers readiness potential, a surge in brain activity that occurs hundreds of milliseconds before a subject consciously decides to move. This proves that the brain initiates the action physically before the mind claims ownership of the choice. Wait.
If biological signal determine everything, how do you explain Benjamin Libet's own finding of the vital powers, the conscious ability to stop an impulse before it acts?
Okay, if the vital power is the proof of free will, as you say, why do individuals with damage to the frontal cortex lose the ability to make the decision? That is the medical improvement cases already being reported. Doesn't this prove that the vital is purely a physical functions of the brain also, rather than a free choice of the soul? This is my response. And behavior is the product of an unbroken chain of biological and environmental factors. As Robert Spolsky argues, to find free will, you would have to find a neuron that fires without any previous causes. No influence from hormones, childhood environment, or genes, but such a neuron doesn't exist. Our choices are just the final output of an algorithm shaped by centuries of evolution and decades of conditioning. Spolsky's second 2 centuries scales shows that snap decision is influenced by testosterone levels, like minutes before, fetal development months before, and cultural heritage centuries before. We are the end product of these variables, not the authors of them. The existence of a legal system also does not prove free will. It merely proves the social need for deterrence. The propositions claims that mens rea, which is also called guilty mind, require free will. We disagree. The law functions like buffer for biological machines. We punish recalibrate behavior, or to remove a broken machine, which is a criminal, from society to protect others. We don't need free will to justify cruelty or rehabilitations. As neuron philosophy advances, we see court increasingly accepting brain abnormalities as mitigating factors. This trend suggests that as we understand biology better, the free will justification for punishment is slowly being replaced by a more scientific, deterministic understanding of human reborn. In summary, while the feeling of free will is a useful social fiction, it cannot withstand scientific proof. From Libet brain scans to Spolsky's casual chance, the evidence points to a deterministic reality. We are not free in the way the proposition holds. We are the complex result of our biological and historical environment and experience. For these reasons, the opposition begs you listener to oppose the motion and also think about what is the definition of free will, and also consider these scientific evidence. While we human may hope, we have the free to make choosing or decision. And in the end, I have to repeat again, the proposition has been mistaken the veto about the Libet experiment, the veto for a supernatural intervention. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. and Miss Speaker. Can you restart the timer, please?
Okay.
Sandy 可以帮我重新调一下 timer. Okay. Okay, go ahead, please. Mr. and Miss Speaker, the opposition side tried to reduce human beings to mere biological machines by citing the Libet experiment and Sapolsky's determinism. However, they fall into a logical trap. First, regarding the Libet experiment, the readiness potential RP only shows that the brain prepares for a simple motor task, like flicking a wrist. It does not prove that complex moral reasoning, like deciding which university to attend, is predetermined. In fact, Libet himself purported free will, the conscious power to veto an impulse. Second, the opposition argues that the legal system is just a buffer for broken machines. This is a dangerous reduction. If we are just machines, then praise and justice lose all meaning. We don't praise a toaster for working. We praise a human for choosing the difficult moral path. Scientific determinism provides an incomplete explanation of human reality. Jürgen Habermas argued that science focuses on causes, that is, physical triggers, while human actions involve reasons, intentionality. Even if a brain scan shows neurons firing, it cannot explain the meaning behind the firing. A cause explains why a rock falls. A reason explains why a person stays in a burning building to save a child. Science describes the how, but free will is the why. Free will and biological influences can coexist through compatibilism. Philosophers of compatibilism argue that as long as we act according to our motives without external coercion, we are free. The opposition claims that genes and environment determine us, but as rational agents, we can reflect on our biological impulses. Education and self-awareness allow us to steer our biological ship if we can override our instincts. Okay. Yes, please.
I have a question.
Yes, please,
You
Sandy.
admit that genes and environment heavily influence us. And what precise nanoseconds does this influence stop and your free choice begin without being shaped by any previous cause? Can you explain or reply that you are sure about that? Your free choice doesn't being shaped by any previous cause or environment, education, etc. 我问了，
没开麦，
有声音吗？有在讲吗
有人没开麦，那个
？Daisy，你开麦。
Oh, 我没开麦。Okay. Sorry. Okay, thank you for the point. The flaw in your premise is treating human consciousness as a simple chronological timeline. As Jürgen Habermas argues, there is a fundamental difference between causes and reasons. While genes and environment provides the causes or the biological impulses, free choice is the simultaneous process of evaluating those impulses through moral reasons. It is not a precise nanosecond where inference stops. It is about the human capacity to transcend those biological inputs to make a reasoned decision. Even if my genes suggest an impulse, I possess the free will to veto it. Okay, so back to my point. My point, I just paused at even my point. Okay, the opposition claims that genes and environment determine us, but as rational agents, we can reflect on our biological impulses. Education and self-awareness allow us to steer our biological shift. If we can override our instincts, like fasting or self-sacrifice, we are exercising genuine agency. In conclusion, the opposition's world is a cold, mechanical one where no one is truly responsible for their crimes or their virtues. But we stand with the reality of human experience because we can weigh reasons, because we can veto impulses, and because we hold each other accountable, we must conclude that free will is not an illusion, but the very core of our humanity. I beg you to propose. That's overall for my point. I still have one more minute.
你要用完吗？要不然就结束。
好。